So very superficially, you both have similar sounding names, Emina, Emmalea.
That's
And
right.
you're also not terribly germane to the topic. You're both on the East Coast. Um,
Ah,
you're in Buffalo, that right, Emina?
yes, near Buffalo.
Uh,
Yep.
Emmalea is out in that area, apparently,
Oh,
Jersey
oh,
Shore. So,
Yeah, like the Jersey Shore area.
oh,
So
Jersey Shore. Where is Jersey Shore?
near Asbury Park.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah.
yeah, Jersey Shore has a rich literary tradition. Uh, I say that.
Very nice.
I mean,
No,
for all,
we have family in Ocean City and in in that area. So
Oh yeah, I know it well.
yeah.
um, so yeah, you have both written on the film Blonde, which was released to Netflix, but also is in theaters. I don't know how many. I'm sure it doesn't have the kind of distribution that like Thor whatever movie does, but I saw it in a small theater in San Francisco, like really small, one of those ones, maybe like a dozen seats, very art house, that kind of thing. And yeah, so I've not only read your articles on Blonde for American Greatness and Compact Mag, but I looked a little bit at something written for Jacobin, which was quite critical of the movie. Um, and the main thrust of the argument there was that it sort of butchered the real Monroe, Marilyn Monroe, the movie Blonde did, and it undermined her sort of nascent feminism and socialist tendencies. Actually, I mean, in keeping with Jacobin Mag, there was a focus on that. So you two have both seen the film, and you want to give a rundown of, out of like a score of 1 to 10, what would you each give? I'll start with Emina.
Wow. I never score movies. That's really interesting. I mean, aesthetically, I would say I would actually give it a 10.
Okay.
I guess if we're gonna 5 stars. No, I mean, yeah, I don't know. I thought it was a really good film.
Yeah, there seems
How
to be.
about
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, how about you and Emily? What about both of you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm the same. I don't really score. My brain is sort of, I'm like glitching right now. I don't really score
Yeah.
movies. I mean, aesthetically, certainly, it was sort of astonishing. So close to a 10, I would say. I mean, I think there were some maybe failures. I don't think it was like a perfect movie or anything, but I certainly think a lot of the like reviews around it have sort of ignored or kind of bizarrely misread the aesthetics of it.
Yeah, there seems to. Well, I would say first that I would give it like a 7. I guess it's a bit spurgy of me to like demand a number on a scale of 1 to 10. What must it be? There's been sort of like two takes on it. Mainly, yeah, there are people sort of appreciating the what's the term? It's true to the Joyce Carol Oates book.
Mm-hmm.
It's not
Mhm.
myopic and it has an aesthetic focus. There's that way to approach it, and then there's the authenticity of depicting Marilyn Monroe's life, which a lot of people are sort of taking the film to task for not doing credibly. It's funny when I saw it, just because of the sort of the time I was born, which is not a whole reason for this particular take. It's partial excuse, I suppose. I just saw Madonna. I really saw like I saw the Material Girl music video. I saw the
Mhm.
Truth or Dare documentary filmed
Mhm.
Blonde Ambition tour. So that's basically what I saw. I mean, I just kind of like first impression, not the first 20 minutes of the film impression. I actually was sort of taken out of this sort of time period from 50s through the 80s until now, and sort of it put into this sort of pre-glamour world of the Great Depression, and that the first 20 minutes of the film actually, which take place in the 30s during her childhood, actually reminded me of the film The Day of the Locust, which is also based on a book, I believe, and it depicts 1930s Hollywood. But yeah, there are two main ways to approach the film that I've seen. Authenticity as far as Marilyn Monroe, who she really was, and a kind of aesthetic or focus on being true to Joyce Carol Oates' book. Do you think there's any correct way to go at that, or?
Do you want me to start?
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So you mean a correct way to analyze it, or correct? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, like which is the better approach?
My approach, right? And Emily's, of course. No. No, you know what? I mean, I can see both points of view in the sense that people are saying this is somehow dehumanizing Marilyn Monroe. I didn't particularly think actually it was. I didn't think that the film itself dehumanized her. I think that the events in her life certainly were continuously dehumanizing, even if you look at her biography. But I think if you strictly are looking at this from a point of view that this is based on a novel. Joyce Carol Oates also has said in her novel at the beginning that this is a fiction. Now, of course, you could say, well, geez, that's a bit of a cop-out because you're basing your fiction on somebody who's real. And I think that does present a certain literary maybe and maybe more so moral dilemma. However, what I objected to with the criticisms that a lot of people went crazy. There was a lot of the uproar was to me just disproportionate, I think, to the supposed offense. Is the fact that they're saying that they did not evaluate this film aesthetically. Like I mean, it's very difficult for me to put on any sort of morality on evaluation of art. Now, there are certain films that I cannot evaluate without ethics, like Triumph of the Will. Oh, you know, I can't just say, wow, what Leni Riefenstahl did was really great in this camera. You know, I mean, you can say it, but you have to understand what the film is about, right? But in this case, I thought I agree with Oates that this is a piece of cinematic art. And I read your essay, your review, Emily, and I'm glad that I'm not the only one who's pointing out some of these scenes that were quite intense aesthetically. I mean, I'm not sure I'm going to watch the film again. I don't think I will. And I felt the same way about The Power of the Dog, actually. Everybody got angry at that too. But I think
what movie was that? Power of the Dog?
The Power of the Dog, yeah, Jane Campion's film. I found that one to be aesthetically just fascinating and intense and disturbing and all of those things, right? It's kind of a similar almost style in a sense, but this without a doubt, this was an intense film to watch. There was a disturbing element too. But I think that this combination of beauty and violence was perfectly captured. Certainly, how Joyce Carol Oates sees the entire thing. So, but I'll take it. I'll give it to Emily what she thinks if she wants to add something.
You both described the film as a horror film, actually. Not solely or even predominantly, but you know that came up. And how would you say it's a horror film, Emily?
Yeah, I mean, to me, well, I'm like sort of a horror freak. I really enjoy, so to me it was quite obvious that it was a successful horror movie because, well, I mean, I guess the first thing would be like this kind of common trope in horror movies, like the double, you know. And
they definitely made Joe DiMaggio look like a monster. That's for sure.
Yes, there were many monsters, and there's also as you point out in your review, Emina, this sort of like this thing that Joyce Carol Oates actually does in a lot of her novels, which is like kind of navigate this eerie border between violence and beauty or violence and love. And I think that's certainly what the film is doing, and that's the space of horror, you know, this thing that keeps happening aesthetically in the movie of like a kind of merging of Marilyn Monroe with Norma Jean, and a separating of the person from the identity is like formally, I think, quite horrific, you know, scary. And then sometimes, of course, it makes for like blissed out moments of union, like that really trippy threesome scene where bodies blending. It's like a kind of watercolor or something. But that too, like this idea of fusing with another can be quite scary. So I think all of these sort of like the kind of energetics of moving together and separating, I think it does really well. And that's like sort of, what Norma Jean Marilyn Monroe was navigating.
Yeah, there's almost a like a body horror element to it, like a Cronenberg film, the way you put that the threesome thing, the flesh becoming more. Now it's much more vague than that. I mean, Cronenberg does actual literal kind of graphic depictions of flesh meshing, but
yeah, it's more that's an almost like operatic, like transcendent spiritual. They almost seem like angels or something.
Yes, I felt it too. Yeah, absolutely. It was kind of like erotic and disturbing at the same time.
Yeah, it was the most spiritualized depiction of a threesome on drugs.
Yes. But yeah. I mean, to me, the men, I mean, they're really loose, obviously, presentations or representations of Edward G. Robinson Jr. and Charlie Chaplin Jr. But I think there was almost a gay male sexuality there going on with the two of them. And so the sexuality and the gender was kind of in this fluid state. And obviously the idea, the way it was filmed, like you were saying, Emily, the way the bodies are blending together, and there is a kind of almost sacred moment, and then it profanes, right? And then, he turns on her in that moment when he tells her, don't be nice to us.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it was, it's a kind of horror that you can't look away, that you're, you're going, is this really presented erotically? But I mean, I think that's the violence of Eros too. Eros is a kind of, like you said, this fear of fusing with another is also part of that. So I think there's so much more going on in this film than this, I don't know, these kind of superficial notions of whether Monroe was depicted well or not. And certainly the leftists didn't take too kindly to the abortion scenes, of course. So
yeah. As far as the politics go, I think there's something interesting as far as the way that gay men are depicted in this. They come off as frankly kind of predatory and sleazy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's not an angle I've seen. The abortion stuff I've seen mentioned more, and kind of vague feminist themes as well. But yeah, that one. Not that I want to start any trouble, but I wouldn't go out.
Oh, go ahead.
I wouldn't go out there and be the first to announce this or whatever. But yeah, that's not very flattering as far as kind of a lifestyle of gay men go. Now, of course, I suppose they're bisexual, but.
Yeah, but I think that's what's so interesting about that like trio, because on the one hand they're really vampiric, but on the other hand they sort of at times really, really comfort her, and I think there's something interesting about like there seems to be like a momentary respite from the number two or something, from this like going back and forth. There's something like stabilizing about the triangle. I mean, and also, yeah, I mean, she seems to like love them in this way. And I mean, I really liked how sort of they were both gay and not gay. I mean, it was very unclear. And I mean, I'm also just like a huge Xavier Samuel like fangirl, so this could be my own. Like, I'm like, no, he's good. But I thought that was very interesting. Hard to pin down.
I'm sorry, Charlie Chaplin Jr. was that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, he was more predatory, I think, than Eddie, right? He was more. I think he was more almost metaphysically complex. At least the way that they presented this particular character, right? So, but I completely agree with you too. I think it's interesting. They're gay, they're not gay. There's a kind of fluidity constantly going on. But I don't think that any man in this film was depicted nicely. I think this is almost like misandrist film. There is, I mean, they say this is misogynist. No, I think it's quite the opposite. I think every single man, I can't remember any character in there that was presented, any male character that was presented in a good light. Every single one.
Arthur Miller might come the closest, but it wasn't
maybe
depicted well. He just was not depicted as a monster. So I don't know what kind of big victory it is.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, there's almost a way in which all the guys around her take on a kind of sinister quality, because, I mean, my reading of it is very much that it has to do with the creation of images. I mean, obviously the image of Marilyn Monroe, but the creation of images in general and like the disseminating of them, which, you know, there's always something really unsettling and even violent, we could say, or formally violent about that process. And so there's always something, there's almost like this sort of magnetism or this weird orbit around quote unquote, like the Marilyn Monroe image or whatever that makes other things take on this sinister quality because they're trying to kind of extract something from her or about her.
Yeah, the Chaplin Jr. character, I shouldn't be too concerned about spoilers, I suppose. If anyone's listening to this, they've probably seen it. But but when the shoe dropped at the end, that was, if not horror alone, you know, that it's certainly something similar to like a thriller film. That was just really heartbreaking and terrible. And I believe, Emina, you call the Charlie Chaplin Jr. character more vampiric and worse, kind of morally. And I believe he was the one responsible for keeping up the front of a missing father who's in contact, right? And then the rest at the end. Yeah.
Right. He created the fairy tale aspect of it, right? Because if you know, these letters were always like, you know, my dear daughter, and you know, it's almost like who even speaks like this, right? And there's so much unsettling of the fact that she calls all these men daddy, right? And
right, that was a little off-putting. I mean, even if you're like somehow like kind of on the anti-woke side of politics, you realize just how much how liberal you really are when you keep seeing her say that, and you're like, why do you put it that way? Why do you do that? You know?
It's true. No, there's just so much, I think, layering of it was almost like the images were layering the metaphysics of the person or her image and also her persona, right? Because I think there are these several personae that are working there, and then you're trying to find who this little girl is, right? And I think that the inclusion of her as a girl was important. That was difficult for me to watch, actually. Out of everything in the film, it was the abuse that the mother is doing to the girl, and the actress, the little girl who was playing her. I think she did such an amazing job at conveying absolute terror. The way this you know, the terror on her face, in her eyes, was so palpable to me that that's like to me that was like the most horrific part, actually, of the film. Not that the other stuff wasn't intense, but to see a little child, you know, be treated in such a way, obviously that's really what I think Marilyn or Norma Jean is trying to kind of go back into. It's almost like the baby in her womb that's talking to her is really herself in some sense, right? The little girl that she's trying to kind of reach to, you know, towards.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it's herself, and then this idea that she's always sort of most content when she is pregnant. This kind of all of these doublings that are taking place are really fascinating, and that's why I think like the talking fetus aspect, which got, you know, people claim, I guess Planned Parenthood and others are saying that it's anti-abortion, or it depicts abortion in a quote unquote like false light or something like that. False image of abortion is just such a myopic reading because I mean, clearly it's doing, I mean, whether or not the talking fetus was like aesthetically interesting is like another thing, but I don't think in any way this was like an anti-abortion movie.
Yeah, I actually have a little difficulty remembering that part. Did they actually show like a fetus talking, or I just remember like a voiceover thing going on? She was imagining the.
No, it was a voiceover.
Yeah, voiceover.
Yeah.
Not like that comedy. Look who's talking.
No. No.
Okay, good.
No, I mean, and you know, I have never seen a film where it has depicted abortion in such a way, because, you know, Hollywood really kind of, or films generally, depict it in a very clean, sanitary, and almost magical way. You know, it's like you just wave a magic wand and, you know, the baby's gone. And this was the particularly the second one, when the instruments, you know, are going. I mean, that was, you know, I was so surprised actually to see it in the film. But I don't think that the filmmaker or the writers or anybody made this into an anti-abortion film. I don't think so. I think that there's a kind of lack of judgment here. In a sense, I think what they're maybe saying is, she didn't make that decision, right? Somebody else made that decision for her. So if there's any sort of judgment, that's what they're saying.
Yeah,
But
I think the people critical of it, I guess they don't like the implication that if it weren't for these men, either heavily suggesting or outright demanding that she get an abortion, she wouldn't have tried that. In their eyes, she very well may have done that to advance her career and just focus on herself. Right.
But and of course also the abortion scenes they feel very much like offshoots of, I mean, they're sort of lit in the same way as her screen tests, or they're very like obviously dramatic and cinematic. So there's something again, like over and over again, about this like strange image and harsh light. And I think that the fact that people seem to not be able to get past the idea of like that it's sort of somehow dehumanizing the real Marilyn Monroe or Norma Jean points to some kind of, maybe like, I don't know, we have maybe a strange relationship to fiction now.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's almost like we can't really separate it, and we want to hold up her as some sort of model, I guess. It's very strange. It's almost like they're treating her as Dante's Beatrice or something, right? There's this sort of the holiness, and yet at the same time the defilement. I mean, meaning the way that some critics are responding. And there's a lot of hatred, I think, for Joyce Carol Oates too, for the way she writes and what she. There was a particular article by Bruce Bower. Is that how you pronounce it? Bawer, right? Bower.
I think so.
Yeah, it's the American Spectator, and it was an extremely harsh article. And there are several people who have written, against Joyce Carol Oates and. Defending Marilyn, but a lot of these articles are very.
There was
you're
saying there was a film, or excuse me, an article critical of the film and Joyce Carol Oates that came from the right, the American Spectator.
Yeah, the American Spectator. Yeah.
That's actually a little. I'm surprised because it seems as if, in my kind of cursory reading of what's going on, that it's the right sort of limply defending the film, whereas the left quite dislikes it. That's sort of...
The left dislikes it, but I think that the left isn't even attacking so much the abortion thing, which obviously it's part of it. But I think it's this really strange, almost attachment that they have to the image of Marilyn Monroe, and I don't really know where it comes from. It's a very for example, when I read the article in American Spectator, it was the hatred was so palpable towards Joyce Carol Oates that it seemed to me the article, that's all it was. And I get a little bit irritated at stuff like that, because I think as a writer, you need to maintain your distance. You need to maintain an aesthetic distance, really, in order to evaluate something. And if you can't, if there's such an emotion that's being involved, I don't think that you're able to then evaluate the thing properly. So
how old is the Joyce Carol Oates book? Was the politics of that not particularly controversial at the time, and it's only been rendered controversial by changes in feminist thinking now, or progressive thinking?
I don't know. Go ahead, Emily.
I think it came out in 2000.
Yeah.
And I'm not actually sure what the reception, like politically, of the book was. I think Joyce Carol Oates maybe has gotten like more controversial since the release of that.
In the introduction to the book, 20th anniversary, Elaine Sholter says that there was some sensationalism, or she was accused of some sort of sensationalism at the beginning. But now, because they're looking at it in the context of the Me Too movement, they're saying this is a different kind of book, I guess. So, but I don't know exactly. I only know this from the introduction to the book. I don't know any others. Articles or anything at that time. I don't remember. I remember when the book came out, and I remember kind of browsing through it. I ended up not reading it at the time, but anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I think there has been an increase in like a sort of infantilizing attitude in, I guess, like whatever, contemporary feminism, since 2000. So I think a lot of these reviews that claim to be wanting like a more empowering, it's almost like they want this story to be somehow empowering or showing like, you know, X, Y, and Z good things that happened in Marilyn Monroe's life. But I think that they're actually, in a sense, in like sort of infantilizing her.
It's strange because, yeah, like the Me Too movement, you would think would be particularly receptive to her being depicted in the film as just under the thumb of men all the time. Yet there's something about maybe the kind of like iconic status of Marilyn Monroe that they actually need to promote the idea that she was above that and can be instrumental in rising above that. Whereas, you know, it just in women in general, working in a kind of modern white collar environment, really are under the thumb of these often casually expressed forms of misogyny or something. So, you know, the kind of the theory of how women are being treated in general seems to be more brittle than ever.
Mm-hmm.
Making that the way that she's depicted in this film would be agreeable, but there's something about preserving the status of Marilyn Monroe as like a model of some kind for women going forward, that they need to actually deviate from what Me Too suggests about society. At least that's what it means to me.
Yeah, and I mean, I believe one of the things that people have been pissed off at Joyce Carol's for is that she said something along the lines of, and I don't even know if this was recent or about her book, Blonde, but something along the lines of like, you know, Marilyn Monroe was of course, complicit in her own eyes, and people lost their mind over that, and or at least it seemed like it when I was kind of haunting Twitter trying to see what people were saying about this, and I think. I think that's a really sort of telling example of the way quote unquote feminists are thinking now, because to me, I mean, that of course she was complicit in her own demise, like that, and that's not a bad thing. And I think that, you know, that's in a sense giving her some kind of power. It's not saying that she was, you know, she of course helped to create her own image, and she did love the cameras to some extent. I mean, these are just realities.